Here's another 1D kinematic equation problem with one object catching up to another. A cat walks along a straight path at a constant speed of 1.50 meters per second. A dog, sitting at rest 3 meters behind the cat, notices the cat and starts accelerating towards it at 0.5 meters per second squared. Here's the video solution for this problem. Okay, the question's asking first, how long does it take the dog to catch up to the cat? How far has the dog traveled once it has caught up to the cat? And C, how far has the cat traveled once it has been caught by the dog? Okay, so like all of the other problems when one object catches up to another, I'm going to make a table so that I can organize the data for the cat and for the dog. So we have that the cat walks along a straight path at a constant speed of 1.50 meters per second. So that's the initial velocity of the cat, 1.50 meters per second, but it's a constant velocity, so that means it's also telling us that the acceleration of the cat is 0. A dog sitting at rest 3 meters behind the cat notices the cat starts accelerating towards it. Okay, so the dog's sitting at rest, so that means that its initial velocity, v initial, is 0 meters per second. It starts accelerating towards the cat, 0.500 meters per second squared. Now there's the part about the dog, which is sitting at rest 3 meters behind the cat. Okay? So if I were to do the delta S of the cat and the delta S of the dog, the delta S of the cat would then be, let's say, x, some value, so the cat travels a certain distance. The dog would then be traveling 3 meters more than the cat because it has to catch up to the cat and it's 3 meters behind it. So it would be x plus 3. Okay, so this time the delta S of the cat and the delta S of the dog are not equal to each other because they don't start at the same position. Okay, so now if we think of the delta t, since the dog is catching up to the cat and they're both starting at the same time, then we know that their delta t, the time that the dog catches up to the cat, is the same. So the time that the dog is traveling is the same as the time that the cat is traveling. Okay, so let's think of an equation now. We're going to find an equation for delta S for the cat and delta S for the dog, but we're going to do them separately. So I'm going to write delta S for the cat is equal to v initial delta t plus 1/2 a delta t squared. We know that the a for the cat is 0, so that means this whole term goes to 0. So I'm left with just v initial 1.50 times delta t. All right, let's do the same thing for the dog. The delta S for the dog is equal to v initial delta t plus 1/2 a delta t squared. The v initial for the dog is 0, so that means this whole thing goes to 0. So I'm left with 1 over 2 a, which is 0.5 delta t squared. Okay, so if I multiply 1/2 times 0.5, I get 0.25 delta t squared. So this time I can't say that the delta S of the cat is equal to the delta S of the dog, but I can say that the delta S of the cat is x, and the delta S of the dog is x plus 3. So I'm going to call this x for the cat and x plus 3 for the dog. I'm going to solve for x for both equations. So the left side, x equals 1.5 delta t. That equation's fine. I've already solved for x. Now I'm going to solve for x in the other equation. So I get 0.25 delta t squared minus 3. So now I can say that the two x's equal one another. So I can rewrite the equation as, so I'm basically doing substitution. 1.5 delta t is going in for x in the second equation. So I have 1.5 delta t equals 0.25 delta t squared minus 3. I'll rearrange that. 0.25 delta t squared minus 1.5 delta t minus 3 equals 0. So now I'm just going to plug this into the quadratic formula in my equation, in my calculator, sorry. So I have 0.25 is my A value, my B value is negative 1.5, and my C value is negative 3. And I get delta T is equal to either negative 1.58 or 7.58. Okay, so I use my calculator this time. I have a polynomial solver on it where I can just plug in the A, B, and C and find the value of delta T. But if you needed to, you can use the full quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where the a is the first coefficient, the b is the second, and the c is the third. And the order has to be correct. So the delta t squared comes first, then the delta t, and then just the number without a variable. Okay, and instead of x in this question, we're not really solving for x here, we're solving for delta t. So that's what delta t would equal. If you plug all those values in, you should get the same two answers as me, negative 1.58 and 7.58. Now it makes no sense that time could be negative, so this one can be excluded. So our answer is 7.58. So in part A, where it asks, how long does it take the dog to catch up to the cat? It takes 7.58 seconds. In part B, it asks, how far has the dog traveled once it has caught up to the cat? Okay, so my dog has traveled x plus 3. So x plus 3 is how far my dog has traveled, which is equal to 0.25 delta t squared. Okay, notice my dog has traveled this amount, x plus 3. Okay, so that's how far my dog's traveled, 0.25. My delta t is 7.58, and I just need to plug that into my calculator. And I get that the distance the dog travels is 14.4 meters. And then for C, the question is asking how far has the cat traveled? That's just x, which would be 14.4 minus the 3. So I can subtract the 3 and get 11.4 meters. Or I could also have used that x is equal to 1.5 times delta t. Okay, this should give me the exact same answer. If I do 1.5 times that value that we got for delta t, 7.58, I get 11.4 meters. Okay, so either way I get the same answer. Okay, so I hope this helps. We've done a previous question, I think it's number 7, which was saying that the two objects started at different times. And so you saw how to address that. But you might also see a question where the two objects start at different positions. So if one object catches up to another, their delta s's wouldn't be the same. In this case, the dog has to travel 3 meters farther than the cat would have to travel, since it's behind the cat by a distance of 3 meters. Okay, hope this helps. Let me know if you need anything. Thank you. Bye.